Hi, Therese. How
Hi,
are you?
good. Nice to see you, Pamela. It's really nice to be here. Thank you.
Very nice to have you here on Voices to the Path of Soul Freedom. Um, it would be nice if you could share a little bit of your background.
Sure. I have been in the teachings, studying the teachings of the Ascended Masters for about 35 years now. I found the teachings in South America and Argentina. Actually, my first books were in Spanish. My first affirmations and decrees were in Spanish. And that's where I found Saint Germain was between Argentina and Brazil. And then I came back to the States and I had many different experiences. I was originally from France, so I have a quite a bit of European background too. Um, I lived in Montana for more than 20 years, served with Elizabeth Clare Prophet, had raised a family there, and and in the last 7 or 8 years, I've been living in Florida, and but going back to Montana to reconnect always with the flame of the Western Shambhala, and so I believe it's my passion. It is my passion to share the teachings, and it has been since I first found the teachings. I from back in the days when we would do lectures in libraries to everything else. I've used a lot of online platforms over the years, and we created a large network of light bearers. We were doing violet flame mantras and miracles on the radio. We were doing many different things. I actually have a site that is like a hub site that connects to all of the work that was done previously, which is called ascendedmasterwebsites.com, ascendedmasterwebsites.com. And that gives you an overview of all of the various things that I was involved with over the years. Went to Russia twice, went to Montreal, Canada, taught teachings there. So I've just been really, really passionate about this. I spend a lot of my time in prayer, and I do feel the closeness of the masters, though I have also had to go through my own dark night of the soul. Um, and and what I would say is that a lot of the work that I've had come to me has felt very much inspired. And I always go back to the original vibration of Mark at La Tourelle, to Mark and Mother at the beginning, to really reinvigorate my spiritual identity and flame with what they were trying to accomplish. And because it's easy to depart from that over time, and the world just catches up with you. And so um, I, let's see, this was about 15 years ago. I sat down, I had been prompted to pick up music and picked up a guitar, also taught myself to play piano. I know these were all um, past life attainments that came back to me. And in about 3 weeks' time, there were almost 50 songs that came through for me in terms of music and everything else. And it's like when I'm in these creative spurts and cycles, it's such a joy because I feel so close to the etheric plane. But then to implement them and put them out into the world, it ended up being a 12-year project. And so I wrote and recorded as best I could with the help of a couple of friends, 52 songs of divine love. I'm still, that we can always perfect the work, but it was the best offering I had at the time. The words are truly, and even the melodies from, I believe, from the etheric plane, I've really felt Jesus strongly um, goading me towards, well, he was the influence behind this. I really do think that is so. So then after I was in Florida, um, I started getting this impetus to write poetry. I had written poetry before. We wrote this very special book called The Legend of the Ancient Days, which is a poem book, and it has it's the whole story of Sanat Kumara in poetry form. And back in the time, I had asked people in the community who were from different countries to translate this into their own languages. And so I just recently put the book out again with not only the story translated, but also the initiations of Sanat Kumara that we find in the Ruby Ray book. And this is been processed through my awareness and consciousness as I read the book and as I put things together. I believe that the masters do, they give us teachings, but they also want us to be able to internalize them and to be able to find the next step. And so this was for me a very big clarification. And that book I just put forth again, it's called The Son of Kumar and the Initiations of the Ruby Ray. And so I have been very much close to his heart and close to also the Master Serapis. In a book that I recently put together, I had been very sick and I truly thought I might leave embodiment. It's happened to me a number of times, but the masters have saved me from so many accidents and illnesses and surgeries. It's tremendous, actually, what I've had to go through, but come through in this life. And so I was working on, I knew I had to get this teaching out. And so it was like, as I was going through a tremendous amount of physical discomfort with pain meds and everything else and antibiotics and all of that, this book came into form and in the next level. And it was glorious because I could feel the fire of God. And it's almost like, you're straddling the two octaves, the physical and the etheric, and bringing it forth. And so that book, it's called God, the Geometry of Divinity, has so much in it. And it really also ties back into and plugs back into the ancient Egyptian awareness and tradition that, of course, this is why the Master Serapis chooses Luxor for the place where the retreat of the Ascension is. And so when we tie into this, we're also tying into the Atlantean consciousness that was brought from the retreats of Atlantis back to Egypt, and it really comes down to man, know thyself as God. It really comes down to our spiritual anatomy. It comes down to understanding, like Einstein said, that we are like these, we're basically light and sound wave walking around in a flesh form, and so it's about understanding both our humanity and how to anchor that God self that is ours, that is our higher self. And so I spent a lot of time on that, spent a lot of time with the Violet Flame, did books and radio shows for years on the Violet Flame. And of course, I have been practicing the Violet Flame myself for 35 years on a regular basis, and I'm so grateful to Saint Germain for that gift, and also did a tremendous project back when I was actually pregnant with my third child, and he was in the womb, and I felt he was helping me. We were doing the Journey to the Etheric Retreats of the Heaven World and put together pictures, art pictures with digital art, where I was reading the descriptions of the etheric retreats from the book that Elizabeth Clare Prophet, mother, had published, and was trying to find ways to bring those pictures into form, matching the description from the retreat. So it was interesting because I actually felt the presence of my unborn child helping me with that project, and he was, of course, in the retreats at the time. So that was another very large project that came out, and that is available at ethericretreats.com and also in a book. And so there have been many, many things, and I am just overwhelmed with gratitude for the opportunity to be able to facilitate not only the masters, but the messengers, and to be able to prove the steps of this path. I remember years ago, I said to my God self and to the masters, I want to prove this path. I don't want to just walk this path. I want to prove it. And I had no idea how challenging that would be. And it has been tremendously challenging in some ways, but tremendously rewarding in so many others. And there's really no other path. There's really no other path than to walk the path home. I mean, what are we going to do? Keep re-embodying? That was Gautama Buddha's mission to help us overcome the wheel of rebirth. And I have a little granddaughter now, and I watch how how challenging it is for any soul to come back into embodiment. The entrance is difficult and the exit is often difficult. And I see the teething and the just all the various things that babies have to go through, the controlling of their emotions, the digestive upsets, the colic, this, that, all of these things, learning how to crawl on your hands and knees again. And I remember Mark Prophet once said something about having to be a baby with oatmeal drooling down your chin again. And I ponder these things, and I ponder how fortunate we are that we have with this path and with these teachings a way through, a way out, because we've been told by the masters that if a person finds these teachings, they are probably at least 25% of their karma balance. Otherwise, they would be too dense to even, affiliate. And then based on that, they have told us that if we give diligent violet flame decrees, we can balance on average 1% a year. So if you do the math, you can see that with the 51% dispensation, which was given in the middle of the last century, where souls were given the opportunity by the lords of karma to return home with only 51% of their karma balance versus 100%, they have to balance the rest on the etheric side. But nevertheless, it basically gives somebody an opportunity, if they find the teachings and apply themselves in 26 years or so, they could get to the 51% mark. That's for the vast majority of people, unless there was something that would really preclude them from making their ascension in this life. And so this is a tremendous opportunity, one that we haven't had probably ever in our existence since, the fall in the fourth root race, the fall of the angels. So I think that we need to take this very seriously and understand what incredible opportunity we have in this dawning of the golden age of Aquarius, or in this beginning of the Aquarian cycle, that we were given the teaching of the violet flame, the awareness of the masters, and the wonderful, the extraordinary teachings that came through Mark and Elizabeth Clare Prophet, thousands and thousands and thousands. I marvel at how she did that, and how much love came through her to bring us these teachings, to bring us this, to bring us these dictations, and all that she went through personally, because she still had to suffer a lot, and I'm aware of a lot of the suffering that she went through, and various betrayals and situations that happened throughout her life, and so she was not immune from suffering, but she gave so much, and so that's my passion too, to help make sure that I can play my part in leading people to her, because sometimes, it's nice to have somebody else who recommends you as opposed to just self-promotion. So I want to be her recommender. And I remember one time in prayer, I said, I want to be your St. Paul. St. Paul did something for Jesus, and that changed the world. And he wasn't perfect, and I'm not perfect either, but I'm perfecting. And I truly want to be that one who brings my flame and my journey and my awareness and my initiations to the table, and says, here, mother, this is, I vouch for you. And so everything I do, I vouch for her. And I had a most beautiful moment with her after my wedding. I had my head on her shoulder, and we had this most beautiful communion where she thanked me for something I was going to be doing in the future. And she said to me, I'm grateful to you for life. And I could see she was looking into the future. And I said to her, mother, I'm grateful to you for so many lifetimes. And so as I go about my work, which I do in spurts of very intense creative joy and effort, I think about how, not only is this work for the physical plane, but it's also in the etheric plane, because everything we do has a correspondence in the etheric plane. And so who's to say that the work we're doing isn't being read right now in the retreats of the Great White Brotherhood? I believe it's. And souls what we're doing is for souls, and everything we do is for the souls. And so we have to look at it from the greater perspective than just the physical illusion of Maya that surrounds us. And so, getting back to the poetry, when I was in Naples, after I got here, I was just astonished by how much beauty there was in this area. I love flowers, I love colors, I love ocean, I love all these wonderful things, you know. And of course, Montana is very beautiful too. The mountains, it's a very different beauty. That's the beauty of the father, and here we have the beauty of the mother. And I was inspired to write poetry. And I'd started out by simply taking beautiful pictures, and then each picture would coalesce a certain thought form or glyph, and at first it started very simply, and then little by little I started to really feel the presence of the masters, or of my Christ self, basically helping me put these things together in extraordinary ways. And it gave me so much joy to see this precipitating. And I ended up writing 176 poems, which is a lot, in about 3 years' time, on and off. And I would say a third of those poems are extremely spiritual. They contain glyphs and keys to the teachings also. Initially, my human objective was to write poetry for people who were not interested in the teachings, but I realized as I went through this process that I really can't separate myself from the teachings. And so I just had to say, fine, you know, we'll have the teachings in these poems. And because that's what God wanted. So that's another big project that you can find. And all of my books are published at this website called booksforaquarius.com. And you can find my poetry books there. I also have a website, mostbeautifulpoems.com, that publishes them also. And so for the most part, everything I do is I give the work freely. For the most part, most of it is for free or very little, because I I want to, I know the masters want us to give the teachings for free. And that is, they have told us directly. And I have found that somehow in my life, by the grace of God, I'm supplied, and I never know what's going to come next. And I was reading recently Mark Prophet's stories that I'm publishing in a book working on right now. And it was the same for him. In fact, one day Moria said to him, I want you to go buy a birthday gift for mother. And he said, oh, you want me to pay for it? And the master said yes. And so he went out and got a $50 gift for mother. And then that night somebody came to his door and gave him $50. And so he said the master always pays his bills. And I speak about this because I know we're, especially in this economy, we all have challenges. And I have been told internally again and again, you lack for nothing. You lack for nothing. You're taken care of. And it's a huge human leap of faith to do this, and to understand that everything is in cycles. And I don't know how long these creative cycles will be for me. I know I'm still in one right now by God's grace. I'm determined to complete it. I have no idea what my future holds or how long I will be in this plane, because I have had many illnesses and surgeries in this life. And so it is absolutely essential for me to do everything I possibly can while I'm still walking the earth, to bring in that kingdom of God on earth as it is in heaven. And so I do believe that if you look at the websites I've done, which is ascendedmasterwebsites.com, or if you look at the books I've written at booksforaquarius.com, or if you look at the songs I've written, songsofdivinelove.com, and the poetry and mostbeautifulpoems.com, and so forth, that you will find a tremendous amount of fire and devotion that I put into everything I do. And one other aspect that I spent a lot of time working on was a work that I did with my former husband, on the inner family archetypes, which was a system of psychology. And at the time, I had the experience, which I believe was in a dream with the Master Kuthumi. And I'm going to take it for real, where he asked me to help bring this work to the world. And so I did a lot of work at that time on that and put a lot of devotion into that. It's a very powerful and helpful model, but especially when you sublimate it and you bring it into the congruency fully with the teachings and with with anchoring our divinity. And I was just speaking to somebody in Russia who told me, when you came out and did this work 17 years ago now, we're still using it so much and it's so helpful. And as I was reworking some of this work and reprocessing it for the book that I put forth, the GOD, which is Geometry of Divinity, Mark Prophet's acronym for the word God, I was able to, to really realize what the Golden Age psychology was about to a great degree. Between that and other parts of the book, the E equals MC square, the quantum realities, and all of these mathematical equations, and I'm not a mathematician. In fact, I flunked math in school. So I was like, God, I'm not a musician, and yet I did all these songs, and I'm not a mathematician, and I'm writing about God's mathematics. And that's because, just like Mark Prophet said, the masters kept him from college so that he could be able to tune in without having preconceptions. And so I think that was what was going on. And it's a very, very exciting journey to understand that we have to get to the bottom of our psychology. We have to keep working on it. If we don't have a certain level of psychological wholeness, which goes hand with the violet flame, with transmuting the records that come up as we go through our psychology, which is psychology. Psyche means soul, so it's really the healing of our soul, the science of our soul, and that includes past lives, childhood, etc. If we can get to that place, we can really become a greater anchoring for the Great White Brotherhood, and we can avoid a lot of the shenanigans that we see in organizational culture, because people haven't really worked on their psychology, and that's what I think was holding the teachings of Christ back in the Piscean age. I mean, we obviously had the mystics and the saints who found a way through by God's grace, but overall, I mean, I'm living in a Catholic town, and I still see the Catholic consciousness, and it's very rigid, it's very heavy, it's very self-assured, it's very self-righteous, it's it's so sure of itself. And I think that there's a problem when people are so sure of themselves, because then because it doesn't leave room for the Holy Spirit. And so anyway, that's what I believe the Golden Age psychology can do. And we always have to start from a place of humility. I mean, for sure. I remember the teaching that Alpha, who is the ultimate manifestation of divinity in our galaxy, Alpha and Omega, the masters told us Alpha is the most humble. And so if we think about it as a pyramid of humility rather than a pyramid of power, I think that would really do a lot of good. So I try to remind myself of that. And of course, we all have egos, and we're all trying to sort through our, all of our childhood and past life experiences on the playground of life, and all of the owies and all of the things that have gone on over all these years and lifetimes with various souls that we may be back in contact with. But if we look at it from the perspective of humility and the perspective of joy and the perspective of service, I was telling a friend recently, we have to be careful of false hierarchies, because I've had to contend with a lot of them, and I've had to process them. I've had to really, really, really pray for discerning of spirits in my own being as well. And I think that that's a test that comes to everyone who draws closer to the masters. We know in the Bridge to Freedom, Geraldine Innocente had a problem with that. And Mother, when she first started out in the Summit Lighthouse, was given as an assignment to sort through the dictations that were given by Geraldine and the dictation that were, and to sort through them, which ones were the real masters and which ones were false hierarchy. And I had to go through certain tests and initiations on that in this life, which I'm not going to get into right now. But the thing that I've realized ultimately is that, I've seen false hierarchies crop up everywhere in every organization, and all organizations connected to the masters also. And it's because we know that we have false hierarchy imposters of every master and our own Holy Christ self. And what keeps us safe, the only thing that can truly keep us safe is the Ruby Ray path, because the true hierarchy is the hierarchy of Sanat Kumara, Gautama Buddha, Lord Maitreya, Jesus Christ, Padmasambhava, Guru Ma, and then, Guru Ma and her Chilas as we stand on the South Gate with the Flying Eagle in the Ruby Ray initiation. So we have to really understand that the Ruby Ray hierarchy is the only hierarchy that we must cling to. And the way that out pictures in the decree by Sanat Kumara, he says, know the Lord in the working of events. Well, the way the events work is sacrifice, selflessness, surrender, and service. And so if we really put everything that we do through those lenses, I think that we can make great progress. And that is the progress ultimately that will lead us to the ascension, and through that, through the capstone of the pyramid, So those are some of the things. I know you had asked me, and I have been talking all along, but you've asked me to play a song, one of my songs, and I decided I would start with Shrine of Love, simply because it's a beautiful song that was inspired by a Ruby Ray teaching or decree that is in the Ruby Ray Invocations that the Summit Lighthouse publishes. And I remember one time I was driving Mother at the ranch, and she had just picked up the Ruby Ray booklet. It had just come off the press, and she just was looking at it, and she handed it to me, and she kept saying, isn't this the most beautiful thing you've ever seen? Isn't this the most beautiful thing you've ever seen? Of all the books that she had written and worked on in projects, the Ruby Ray Invocations were her, it was like the cherry on the top of her life. And so I thought about that, and in that, if you open that book, there's a little paragraph that says Shrine of Love. And that is what inspired the song. And so it's basically taken from the Ruby Ray, and it's available through songsofdivinelove.com. And so I thought we could maybe play it now and invoke the presence of Sanat Kumara with us. And I also completely, encourage you to check out the Legend of the Ancient of Days and the Initiations of Sanat Kumara, all at the booksforaquarius.com. And of course, to absolutely dive into the teachings of the Ascended Masters that are published by the Summit Lighthouse. We wouldn't be able to do any of this without those teachings. They are the foundation. They are the beginning and the ending, the alpha and omega of the gospel of the Aquarian age. So that being said, I'm going to play the song now for you, if that works. Okay, I have to turn on my computer. There we go. Let's see if I can get it to go. This was my grandfather's accordion that we used. We bow before thy blessed light, blazing love of the flame. We sing thy sweet sacred name. Eternal Christos, eternal Christos, light of the Logos, we praise thy name. As Holy Spirit, whirling around me, I come to worship at the shrine of love. Soul of infinite fire, thy light is come, arise and shine. Glory of heaven abides, celestial court open wide. Eternal Christos, eternal Christos, light of the Logos, we praise thy name. Bless Holy Spirit, whirling around you, likes us to worship at the shrine of love. Infinite light of the one, intensify thy radiant sun. Sanat Kumara, ancient of days, enter the hearts of these thy saints. Eternal Christos, eternal Christos, light of the Logos, we praise thy name. Bless Holy Spirit, whirling around me. I come to worship the shrine of love. Earth kneels before thy light, victorious too in the night. Joy of the dawn, golden age, in harmony we now proclaim. Eternal Christos, eternal Christos, light of the Logos, we praise thy name. Bless Holy Spirit, whirling around us, leads us to worship at the shrine of love, bids us to worship at the shrine of love, bids us to worship shrine of love.
Thank you.
You're welcome. My friend Dean Anderson and I worked on this. He's a wonderful musician, and then later on, Marius Michael George helped me with the tablas on some of the other albums. And we were using a harpsichord. I had found this harpsichord. I think it was on eBay. It was an old harpsichord, like from I think all the way back from maybe even the Civil War. It was a very old instrument, and he had to tune it all up again. And so then we finally had the harpsichord at the um, at the frequency of the heart, and we know that the harpsichord is the sound of the secret chamber of the heart, and so we included that in that song along with the accordion. And so I just wanted to say that because I'm very grateful for all the people who have helped me. I am so grateful for the people who have prayed for me when I went through a tremendous duress, a tremendous initiations, and I know I wouldn't have made it through without their help, without the masters extending a helping hand through people. And we cannot underestimate the power of prayer or how much we need to have each other's prayers and to pray for each other as a body of God. I was recently listening again to Dictation by Lanello, where he talks about how, I mean, heaven is a plane where everyone operates in love, through love, for love. There's nothing else. And love is fire. And so if you can't get through that fire, you're not going there yet. And so we have to overcome what Jesus talks about in the Jesus Watch, where he says the sense of vain competition that has separated brother from brother. We still have a lot of that. I mean, I'm having to purge it out of myself too, vain competition. And we have to transcend that and replace it with love, because we are who we are in the I am that I am, and every star has its glory, and each star differeth from another in glory. And no, the masters don't sit there and say, well, we don't like this master, we don't want that master. They, Hercules has his place, and so does Mighty Cosmos, and so does Lord Himalaya, and so does Mother Mary and Jesus, and so forth. And if we're going to really join their ranks, we have to have that understanding that we have self-esteem in God, that we don't have to keep doing this other stuff that we've been doing for thousands and thousands of years down here. And I think that's a very, very important. And so to create that culture of love here below, Mark Prophet said that the Summit Lighthouse, our movement, is intended to be, the lighthouse of love. And I always visualize a beautiful lighthouse on the mountain as I enter Corwin Springs. I'm saying someday there's going to be a lighthouse on that mountain, a physical lighthouse of some sort, hopefully, because this is the lighthouse of love. And we have to really demonstrate that love, as he said, to the world, demonstrate it. And to do that, we have to really embrace the culture that's in the etheric plane. We have to claim it and make it our own. Thy kingdom come on earth as it is in heaven. And we are the first fruits. The Chilas, the people who have joined this movement, are the first fruits, and the fruits need to be, I was just thinking of that yesterday, how we have to be plump and juicy and fragrant and not dried up or withered or rotten. And we have to really give God our best fruity offering. so, so anyway, I know this is, I'm speaking a little bit in jest, but not, because this is so key that we have to transcend the human limitation and the historical limitations that have prevented this from really going forth into the world. And in our heart flame is what we need to bring this into the world at a much greater level. And it's the generosity of God that we display that will bring back the generosity of God to us. And that may be very well through the ascension. So I think that's where I'll stop it for now. And unless you have some questions, I'm happy to answer any questions you have. And I'm so thankful for the opportunity to share my passionate love and fervor for God and the masters and Guru Lanello here.
God bless you and thank you. But yes, there are questions. You mentioned it's easy to depart from the path. What can people be aware of?
Oh, well, my goodness. The force of darkness will look for any and all ways. If we look at Screw Tape Letters, C.S. Lewis was warning us about that back then already, and before that, Enoch and so forth. I think it's easy to leave the path physically, to go back into the world, to be pulled back into the the distractions and the seductions of the world. And also when we go back into the world, typically we're a lot less opposed by the fallen ones or by the dweller. And so therefore we kind of get the sense of reprieve. And so we get dulled, and I was thinking of the scripture being dull of hearing. A lot of people can become dull of hearing after a while. But then there's also those where it's easy to depart from the path, even when we're on the path, where we may have the walking of the path, seemingly so, but are we really accelerating in the fire of God? Are we really accelerating in the path? Are we really, I remember Mother once said she was asking God every day to strip her and purge her and send her the fire. And I have made those calls too. And I have felt the fire in the daytime and in my sleep in nighttime too. Because, the fire tries every man's work of which sort it is. And we can't be complacent. And I think it's easy, and it's a human thing after, sometimes decades on the path, to get into a place of complacency. And we have to be, awakened from that complacency, which is why I love the decree, I am alert, awake, awake. Come right now, shake my mental body's grids, remove the ash, transmute it all, give me Christ's mind for which I call. And so we have to constantly remember what our objective is, what our goal is, which is to really become one with Christ. We have to be willing to traverse whatever it is. The dark night of soul is going to be different for everyone. We have to go through our past life karmas. We have to go through perhaps planetary karma that we volunteered to balance. And it is not easy. And like I said, sometimes I felt like I was hanging by a thread, maybe even half a thread, and I would have to call friends. Sometimes I would call my some friends from Summit Lighthouse or ministers or others and say, pray for me, pray for me, pray for me, because I know I'm on this perilous cliff right now. It's a cliffhanger. And yet when we get to the other side of these things, we are that much more strengthened. We've achieved or anchored that much more mastery, God mastery. And there is eventually a resurrection too. So we cannot underestimate how difficult these initiations can be. And I saw Mother go through some tremendously challenging ones also, and that I actually witnessed to. And so none of us is exempt. Jesus said, pick up your cross and follow me. He didn't say, I died for you, now go have a fun time. And we'll meet right up here. We'll meet right back up after you're done at the right hand of the Father. No, he said, pick up your cross and follow me. But he also, spoke of he demonstrated the resurrection. And that's what we also will ultimately do. But all that happens in God's timing. And so people who are having a difficult time, which is a lot of the journey on planet Earth, we have to have that mercy and compassion and awareness of how challenging things are. And that's where, again, the violet flame comes into play, because we invoke the violet flame for transmutation, for the acceleration of cycles, for the consuming of records, and everything that can be taken. We have to do it with free will. Our free will is paramount. If we don't invest our free will and say, God, I want to get rid of this, I want to move through here, I will hang on to you no matter what. The ancient Kabbalists had this term that I love, which is called tikkun, 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 which is clinging to God, clinging to God, clinging to God. And so we cling to God like a drowning person in the ocean would cling to a piece of wood. We cling to God. And I remember in the beautiful paintings by Thomas Kempis, the Voyage of Life. I think, sorry, I'm wondering if that was right name. I think that was, yes, The Voyage of Life. Anyway, the third one, where the man is in the boat and he's going down a rapids, and he's standing up, but he's somewhat bent over, and he's just praying with everything he has to get through these rapids. And it's at the end of life that the angel comes, and that we see the serenity and the peace of the end of life, but he has to go through this incredible rapid and trust that he's going to somehow get through with prayer. And I remember seeing that painting when I was like 20, and I was like thinking, oh my goodness, what does that mean? But now I've experienced a lot more of it. And we really need to get through those perilous times with the clinging to God. So that's kind of an answer. There's probably more answers, but that's one anyway.
And the dark night of the soul?
The dark night of the soul is our returning karma, and Saint John of the Cross and other saints have spoken of it. It is a very difficult situation, and I know I went through it, and I'm thinking I may be through it, but only God knows for sure. Where you feel so bereft and disconnected from God, be, because your karma overwhelms you, whether it's personal or planetary or both. Um, and and that is that dark night of the soul can go on and manifest as all kinds of things, whether it's physical afflictions, whether it's emotional challenges, whether it's depression, whether it's all of these things that come at you, whether it's persecution from friends or family or church or whoever else, business, job, and so forth, children. I mean, all around the mulberry bush. We have to, Jesus said the people closest to you will be the ones that are sent to test you, and it's easy to love your friends, but you have to love your enemies. You have to love those who persecute you, and that's very difficult. And but we work on it. We work on it because we claim the Christ, the universal Christ, the eternal Christos in them and in ourselves, and we have to believe in the power of miracle. That Judas was the one who was sent to betray Jesus, and Judas made his ascension in the next lifetime. He had to be sent to another planet because of the weight of condemnation on him, but he made his ascension. And that is a tremendous lesson, because I think to myself, sometimes people that have betrayed me in this life, or, who's to say that they won't be the next most victorious ones. I remember too a story once of how the three children of Fatima had once moved against Mother Mary way back when, and she held the Immaculate Concept for them, and eventually they became her defenders and the ones that that brought the Fatima message to the world. So we see this again and again, where sometimes the very ones who spat upon us end up being the ones who who are the greatest proponents of our path. And I mean, St. Paul and Jesus, St. Paul, and his conversion also, and so forth. So we see these examples, and so anyway, the dark night of the soul, we all have to go through at a certain point on the path. I think people have this false theology that everything's going to be hunky-dory just because they find the teachings or just because they find a path. Like Catholics believe that as well, right? If you're a staunch Catholic, things are going to go just fine, and it's not the path that we saw Mother Teresa walk or others. And so we have to understand that just because we find the teachings doesn't mean it's all going to go fantastic. In fact, we're opening the way. We're saying we want our union with God. We want the fire of God more than anything else, and we'll do whatever it takes to get there, because this is the only reality and the only real path. And so Sanat Kumara said it's the book that's sweet in the mouth but bitter in the belly, because, and you don't always notice that the first few years you're on the path, but eventually this stuff starts to come difficult if you're blessed and challenged to walk through and work through your karma. And so this idea that we're already so fantastic and it's only going to be more fantastic is a false teaching. It's a false chelaship, and there are false gurus, and there are false teachers, and there are false concepts. That doesn't mean that we don't completely have faith in the process of the resurrection, and we keep putting one in front of the other. Mother would always say, keep on keeping on. That was what she always said, keep on keeping on. And there was a reason for that. And as we advance on the path and in our years, we can see why she would say that. And we don't know what's at the next turn in the bend, but we know that with God, by God's grace, we must and will get through it. And I think it becomes a journey of love, of great love, the love of the Father that loves the Son. And so that's a little bit on the dark night of the soul. I mean, people are suffering everywhere. There's great suffering. There really is. And we have to be mindful of it and be merciful of it and be grateful when we are in days where the sun is shining upon us and be steadfast when the rain comes, basically.
What about, you mentioned in the beginning, you mentioned the etheric plane.
The what?
Etheric plane.
Yes, the etheric plane. Um, the etheric plane is the heaven world. And so in the teachings of the Ascended Masters, they speak about many levels of the etheric plane. They say 33 levels. And life operates on these various frequencies. The first lowest levels are Devachan, which is like the realm of wish fulfillment, which is where people go to heaven and get everything they want before they have to reincarnate, usually. Then you go up higher in the etheric plane. We've been told that life on Venus is at the 5th level. So there's actually life on the planet Venus. We don't see it because it's vibrating at a different level, and it's an etheric level. We know that there are cities and retreats around the world, around the earth, that are also in the etheric plane. And the Grand Teton is one place that is congruent, physical and etheric there. And so the etheric plane is a higher vibratory realm of the physical plane. It's actually still physical, but it's a higher vibratory plane that meshes with the Christ plane, the Christ mental plane. And so the masters are functioning from that level, and they have retreats for us where we can go to. And if you go to the website ethericretreats.com, for instance, or if you read the masters and the retreats or other books, you will understand how this is happening. Our souls leave when we go to sleep, when we go to the retreats, and we wake up and we typically don't remember. But I have found in recent months and years, I often wake up with a song. For the last 3 nights, I've woken up with the song, "O Masses of Love in Symbol Cave." And I know that's not coming from me. And I'm like, okay, we were probably in the Cave of Symbols. We were probably working on that. That's, there's other times where I've woken up with different songs. And so I pay attention to that because I think that that's the way that my soul connects. Some people may have remembrances that are very clear. Typically for me, it's not as common, though I've had a few like dreams of mother and things like that I remember. I've had a few etheric retreat experiences that I remember that are as clear as can be, and I know it's not figment of my imagination. But for the most part, we don't remember. Oftentimes, the body is sleeping, and the consciousness, the soul, has to come back down into the 4 lower bodies. And so, but the etheric plane is very much here. And whenever we are giving an ashram ritual, we were told that every time we give an ashram ritual, the masters who sponsor these rituals, including El Moria and many others, are giving them with us, and that there are souls on the etheric plane giving those rituals. So it's important to give the ashram rituals to connect with that entire Antakarana of light. And every other prayer we do, every other prayer. Saint Germain's service is being given every week in the etheric plane as well as in the physical plane. And so we know that, and then there are souls in the etheric plane who are still working on their ascension, and they join us, and they work with us. And so these are the times where we are not separated at all. Not that we ever are, but there's a real congruency and back and forth. And I believe they're learning through us and working with us, and we're not disconnected, So that's what I would say about the etheric plane. One of the things I would really encourage people, I'm assuming it's open, I don't know for sure because it was closed for a while. If you ever go to Washington, D.C. and you go to the top of the Washington Monument, if you can take the elevator up, there is such a tremendous focus of the threefold flame that Paul Venetian put on the top of that monument. And you can feel it. At least I could feel it. I'm pretty sure if you have some awareness of the teachings and have experienced the decrees and all that, you can feel the light. The light is so incredibly tangible there, and it's a glorious, glorious focus. So we were told that souls meet at the Washington Monument at night before going to their various respective levels of world service while they sleep. And so we can think of that Washington Monument not just as a picture, but as an actual physical, tangible reality of the threefold flame focus blazing over America and for the whole world. It's the flame of liberty. And so that is also on the etheric plane. And so that's a very special place. And so are the Grand Teton, because we know that that's where so much happens on the etheric plane, but it's so congruent with the physical plane that you can practically feel it. And honestly, when I'm down at the Royal Teton Ranch, I can really feel the presence of the Western Shambhala of Lady Master Venus's retreat over the ranch. It's like it's just there. And Gautama Buddha speaks of it as the fire in the rock. It's there. It's there. And I met this one lady one time at the Yellowstone Hot Springs who was from Texas, and she was a Christian missionary. And she said to me, "Oh, I can feel God here. I can feel God here." And so she could tune into it. And that was again the fire in the rock, the fire in the water, the fire that was there, that's there. Um, so so that's what I would say about the etheric plane for now. Yeah.
What and I think one last thing, false hierarchy and the ascension.
Okay, two kind of different things. The false hierarchy, basically, what goes on is that there are many strains of consciousness and beings that embody those strains of consciousness. And there are beings who have not reunited with God, who are not ascended, and they may be to greater or lesser degrees on the left-handed path. Typically they are, because they're not pursuing that oneness with God. And so they divert our energy, they divert our efforts, they divert by pretending they're imposters. They pretend that they're the masters. And I remember once Mother gave a teaching about how Saint Germain came to her, the false hierarchy of Saint Germain, only had one hair. Now she was seeing it from her third eye sight. He only had one hair off in the way he combed his hair. And that's how she recognized it. I think that, different people might recognize it in different ways through vibration. Jesus said, by their fruits shall you know them, the fruits. And he said, and Mother gave us the additional teaching, which is that the fruits are the vibration. So it's not even just what you do, like Saint Sana Kumara told us, it's how much fire is imbued in what you do. It's the vibration, it's the fruit. And so that's we have to be careful, because I shouldn't say seen, I have perceived vibrations of false hierarchy, and I have had to extricate myself sometimes too. And the third gift of the Holy Spirit is the gift of discerning of spirits. It's given to us by Paul the Venetian and his beloved twin flame, who was embodied as Ruth Hawkins and is now the goddess of beauty. And we can call to them to take us to their retreat in southern France, and to be trained and given more and more discerning and perspicacité on the, I'm saying it in French because the word's coming in French, on the discerning of spirits. So we have to be careful, because, but I think in the end, it comes down to the vibration, the fruit, and the fire. If it doesn't have the fire of God truly, then it's a Cain offering. There's a very important story in the Old Testament about the Cain and the Abel offering. And Cain did this great big altar for the Lord, and he put all these fancy fruits on there and whatever else he put on there. And Abel had a simple offering, and God chose Abel's offering over Cain's. And Cain got very upset about that. And in the end, I believe he killed Abel. Anyway, and Abel, we can look at it as the word Abel, but also Able. And yes, because, and I believe there was a teaching about how Abel was actually the soul of Jesus, and I'm not 100% sure, but I know Jesus was embodied as Joshua and King David and many of the other, and Elisha. And so Jesus was embodied throughout the Old Testament. But anyway, the point is that the Christ offering is an offering of humility. It's an offering of love. It's an offering of sacrifice, service, selflessness, and sacrifice, surrender, selflessness, and service. Whereas the Cain offering is is an offering to inspire astonishment and admiration, which Saint Germain warned us about in the Holy Trinisophia. He said, the two greatest sins are to use your free will against your brethren by basically imposing upon them misusing your power to enforce upon them something against their free will, and that can be interpreted in many ways. And the second is the imperious craving to inspire astonishment and admiration. We have to be so careful about that. And he said in that book, he said that that's the one that light bearers tend to trip over, because our psychology, again, wants us to have the well done from others and from our own parents, or from ultimately we're looking for what Jesus received when the voice from heaven said, this is my beloved son in whom I am well pleased. But people tend to default to all these other places to get their validation. And so we have to be careful, because that imperious craving to aspire astonishment, admiration is ultimately what will, what can unseat us, and it's pride. And so our offering has to be the able offering. And so there are a lot of false hierarchs out there, and these false hierarchs use people. And it doesn't matter who you are, it doesn't matter what your title is, it doesn't matter where you are. People can be used by false hierarchs. They often mean well and believe that this is the true hierarchy. And I think that the most important teaching we can take from this is one that Kuthumi gave to the Theosophy, to Ledbetter, where he said that your devotion to the false hierarch or the false teacher is what will ultimately cut you free from that false teacher. And I've thought about that a lot, because if we really love God with all our heart, soul, and mind, even if we're tied into people who are tied into false hierarchs, we will ultimately be cut free through our devotion, through our dedication, through our determination to go home to God. That being said, it's good to be aware and to be careful. And I, like I explained earlier, my what I like to go back to always as a point of measurement is the vibration of Mark Prophet in the early years of the Summit Lighthouse. And there's a wonderful movie that the Summit Lighthouse put out called Mark's Movie, where you can really feel the flame of Lanello and the early days of the Summit Lighthouse there, and the true flame of El Moria, and not a false hierarch. And you can really experience that. And I watched that dozens and dozens of times, because I kept saying, I want to make sure I get back, that my vibration is so close to that and not to anything else, because it's easy to start going off on a tangent and people don't even realize it. And it's like the blind leading the blind, and we are blinded. And these beings on the astral plane are absolutely, they're smart. Lucifer fell on the 3 o'clock line. It's the mental quadrant. These are smart beings. The fallen ones are smart beings, and we have to outsmart them, like El Moria said. So we have to be careful. We have to be careful with false hierarchy. And I think the most, again, the Ruby Ray, sacrifice, selfless service, and surrender, and being humble is really our protection. And it's the protection of the saints. So that's what I would say. We've even been told there's a false hierarch of our own Holy Christ self, an imposter of our Holy Christ self. We have to be careful with that too. A false hierarch of our twin flame, and so forth. So, if we really cling to the heart of Jesus, the Sacred Heart, to the fire, to love, and we really love with all our heart, soul, and mind, we will get through all of that by God's grace. But yes, I mean, in this day and age, and then on top of that, in this day and age, you have all these people who really believe aliens are the next solution, etc. And there was a lot of interweaving between Ascended Master teachings and alien teachings back in South America, even when I was there 30 years ago. And again, it was made clear to me that the masters don't need alien ships or alien beings to bring their message, and my daughter was actually asking me about this yesterday, because we were talking about Scientology, and she said, well, what did they believe in? I said something alien, and she's like, yes. And I said, well, this is the thing. Like we speak of other planets and etheric frequencies on Venus or Mercury, and so forth, but we're working through the Christ, and that's what we are absolutely working through, the Christ and the Christ consciousness. These beings don't work through the Christ consciousness, and they don't direct you to your Christ consciousness and to your Christ self. And if ever person has an encounter with an alien situation, which there are more and more orbs and things going around. Last night there was some kind of really weird thing that happened around us, that some kind of orb or something in the sky, and my daughter was really frightened and said, look, we have to remember the call that through the law of attunement and the law of at-one-ment, and you know, what they do to the Christ in you is this, what they do to the Christ in Jesus. And so we have to claim that Christhood, and that I'm trying to remember the exact words, and it's I'm not remembering them right now, but the point is that it's the Christ is our protection from all of these things, and to constantly go back to the Christ, and to understand that the teachings of the Ascended Masters are absolutely based on the path of Christ and personal Christhood. So, yes.
The ascension?
The Ascension. Well, I was rereading recently the dossier on the Ascension that beloved Serapis Bey gave. I think that would be the number one place to go to get information. The Ascension is the culmination of all of our lifetimes. As we've been told, there are a number of requirements for the Ascension. And one of them is a balanced threefold flame and fulfilling our Dharma, and balancing at least 51% of our karma and all that. And the many souls who may make their transition and not be totally ready for the Ascension can still work from the etheric planes to get ready, while others have to re-embody. The Ascension is the pure fire of God. It's a pure fire of Alpha and Omega. It's the maximum light. And so a soul, the fire of God it's the same fire, whether it's the fire of the maximum light, whether it's the fire in the Ark of the Covenant, whether it's the fire of the Ascension, whether it's the fire of the second death. It's all, or the lake of sacred fire. It's all the same fire. And so when a soul has balanced enough karma and fulfilled these requirements, and she is ready to go through the fire, all the good that we have ever done is crystallized, and we become an ascended master. All of the good that we have ever done while we wait to become an ascended master is stored in our causal body as our treasures in heaven, right? All the good we do every day goes up to our causal body, and the mistakes we make go into our electronic belt, and we have to transmute those with the violet flame, and by doing better, by passing the next initiation. I mean, we get re-initiated on things until we pass them, hopefully, by God's grace. So the Ascension is one where we become crystallized. And you know, I had the wonderful experience where I went to this temple called I'm not going to pronounce it right. I'm going to say Shilai, but it's not. It's Hsilai. Hsilai? I don't know. It's Korean. It's the largest Buddhist temple in America, and it's in Los Angeles. And you go through, and there's beautiful focuses everywhere. It's magnificent. And then there's a little room where they ask you for $5 to go in. It's the treasure room. And I went in, and at the very end of that little treasure room, there is, I think they call it a pearl or a relic. What it is basically when Gautama Buddha was cremated, during the cremation process, he created these pearls, or these, it's like, they're pearls. They look like resin. And holy people, this is a tradition in the East, where the holy people, the monks would go and scour the ashes to try to find these little pearls, or these little focuses. Anyway, and so there's one of them that actually belonged to Gautama Buddha, was part of his cremation, that is in this temple in Los Angeles. And I tell you, the fire that comes off of that little crystal was phenomenal. I was kneeling, I was just like in ecstasy, looking at it like this little pearl, this little which was it's like a congealing, a condensation or precipitation of their consciousness into just the little package of of heaven. And so when we make our ascension, whether it's a physical ascension like David Lloyd and a few other people were given the privilege to have, or whether it's an ascension after the body goes through the cremation process, um, everything that is good about us gets congealed in the fire of God and crystallized for permanency. We're permanent. We're permanent. Until we get to that place where there's enough of us to do that, we have to keep transmuting with the violet flame and with our service and with our decrees and or reincarnate or whatever it takes, because God's not going to put us through that fire until we're ready. Now, those who are absolutely have pledged their enmity with God or have done so much karma or have been given so many opportunities that they're not going to get a reincarnation are brought to that same fire on the dais in the great central sun. And this is the second death, where the soul is literally consumed by that fire and the identity is lost. And then eventually the mighty I Am Presence has to send down a new soul. But that can take a long time. And the sad thing about that is that all of the identity that was in that was a part of that soul, all of the interaction with time and space is dissolved, is lost. And so it's one of those things where we have to understand that everybody's going through the fire one way or the other, and we have to figure out which way we were going to go. And it's not like there's another option out there except reincarnate until you're ready. And I think about that when I see some of these people in the entertainment industry or other places where there's great darkness, and they're just spending all their causal body, they're spending it all on their lusts, and then they will be taken to the second death. I mean, and I'm generalizing because there are always stories of a soul, a great comeback. Saint Therese said, "Heaven is so thankful for every sinner that repents." But for the most part, we know that many of the fallen ones in their consciousness are going that way, and so they're living it up on earth because this is as far as it goes, whether it's Miami Beach or whether it's Venice or whether it's the Maldives or wherever it is, that this is as good as it gets. This is their heaven on earth, and they know. And some of them, keep prolonging themselves by vaporizing, all kind of horrible things going on, because they know they're done, their time is up. So we are preparing as children of God and sons and daughters of God for the ascension, where we are permanently reunited with God, where all of our consciousness has been crystallized, and where we are able, through our attainment, the attainment that we've anchored on planet Earth, and we've been told that those who have gone through planet Earth have an exceedingly great attainment, because this is a tough place to be. It's a tough schoolroom. But there are those who have, like Mother Mary and Hercules and Jesus and many others, Saint Germain, Moria, and so forth. And so we get to the other side, and we can make our ascension, and then we are permanent. And my understanding from what I've read is that in the ascension process, some of the things that we had totally transmuted that can be taken without being, like the extra stuff, the stuff and fluff that's got to go gets consumed. So I think that's also where the book of Revelation says, "I will make your scarlet stain into my essence white," and I'm paraphrasing, but the idea of the scarlet stain becoming as white as wool or as white as snow. And so God perfects us in the end when it's our time to come home. God perfects us, and and El Morya, remember what El Morya said? He said the path upward is worth the inconvenience. He said the ascension is worth it. He says, believe me, it's worth it. Don't shortchange yourself. I remember I was friends with Dorothy Lee, the messenger of music, Dorothy Lee Fulton, who was knighted Lady Edelweiss and by Mark Prophet. And she would always say to me, no matter what, don't let anyone take from you your ascension, no matter what. And that was what she would say to me. And when I went through some of the very difficult and dark trials in my life, I had to hold on to that we have to make the ascension. And that's basically the goal for those who love God enough to want to become permanent in his kingdom, you know? Yeah.
Thank you. uh,
So we covered so
yeah,
many things, didn't we?
yeah.
I feel like
It's
it was a
wow.
whirlwind of covering things, but I'm very thankful. I'm very thankful. And yes, I hope that people will if you read the poetry, mostbeautifulpoems.com, or my books that are on the um, booksforqueers.com, you will there are such important glyphs, and they were gifts from heaven. They were gifts from heaven. I mean, I would be wowed. I would be I would sit here at my desk and have so much joy that these things were coming through, that I was understanding or perceiving, or that it was all clicking together. And I was saying, like, this is from God, and I'm sure, like when Michelangelo did his work, or others, where we just look at this and we say, this is, all glory to God, God working through us, and so these poems contain great glyphs and concepts, and they accelerated me to the place where I could do this next level of publishing that I'm doing right now. And the songs also contain important concepts and vibrations. I wrote these songs and worked on these songs and recorded these songs in some of the hardest years of my life, on a personal level. And I was going through great travail. And it was the consciousness that was held within these songs that I believe came from my higher self, or Jesus, or combined both, the Christ consciousness that helped me weather through some very difficult times. And so these are things that I hope can be helpful to others, along with the various things that I've worked on. But once again, I would say that I wouldn't be here. I wouldn't be able to do any of this if it wasn't for the incredible love, effort, and work of Mark and Mother Elizabeth Clare Prophet, and all of the teachings that have been published through the Summit Lighthouse, and all of the videos that you can find online on YouTube that have been published by their students who took the videos and put them online so that more people can access the teachings. And this is really the way, the truth, and the life for the next 2,000 years. And so I'm simply, like I said earlier, trying to demonstrate the path in my own being, and not knowing what comes next, but praying that God will guide me. And I hope this can be helpful. Yeah. And I'm also very thankful that I had the chance to I had experiences with wonderful, wonderful people like Mother, like Herb Beigel, who was a student of the I Am movement for 40 years before he found the teachings, and he had such a momentum of light. And Mother Kaspari, who was founded the Kaspari, uh, you know, level of the Maria Montessori trainings, took it to the next level, and many others. Dorothy Lee. Um, I had the opportunity to not only rub shoulders, but to actually have deep encounters with these people, and they transferred to me their momentum and awareness and vibration, and that has helped me tremendously too. And then where I live here in Ave Maria, we have the Mother Teresa Museum, and sometimes if I need a boost, I can go to that museum and I can pick up, find, experience the vibration of Mother Teresa. And so these are the great lights that help us forward. And I'm so grateful for everyone who has ascended from the Summit Lighthouse, and for everyone who will. So, yeah.
Thank you.
And thank
I could.
you for the opportunity to do this. This is wonderful. I'm so grateful.
Oh, me
Yeah.
too. I could ask you more, but we probably should stop. So I don't know. Yeah. Well, you might be invited back again. There you go.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that I'm always ready and willing and happy to do this because it's a great joy. Yes. So yeah.
God
All
bless
right.
you. And well, there is one other thing. I really
Yeah,
liked it.
okay, go ahead. Go ahead.
You mentioned a teaching you got that moved you early on from Elizabeth Clare Prophet about love. Um, that there's unconditional love. Do you want to share that?
Oh my goodness, that was so important. I'm so glad you brought that up. Thank you. So what happened was that this was one of my early encounters with mother. Mother put me through a series of a great many disciplines, very intense disciplines that I think were determined to see if I was going to quit the path or not. Because I think most people who went through what I went through would have been like, I'm done. But I persevered by the grace of God. And at the end, after all those years of disciplining, I received these very intimate, beautiful moments with mother where I knew of her, of her great love for me personally. But the point is that so this was one of the earlier encounters. I was living in Washington, D.C., and I was working in Maryland, which at the time I was taking the subway and you had to go all the way around. It was like 20 metro stops. And I was told, oh, mother's here. I was like, mother's here, So I got on the train and I remember running as fast as I could through all the streets, everything. I was running till I was out of breath. I was just like running through all the metros, through everything. I was just wouldn't stop running. I was like, I've got to get there. I've got to get there. So I was running as physically as fast as I could. And I got to the teaching center and she was wrapping up a Michael service. And there was just like maybe one Archangel Michael decree left. So and I was like, I'm here, panting, but I made it. And then mother gets up to go. And I was like, oh no. So she's out in the vestibule, and um, and I had been going through, very difficult life challenges most of my life, and that this was another one of them. And I said to her, and I said, Mother, I said, and I kind of like knock knock, like hello, excuse me, I'm brand new, pretty very close to brand new, and I said, I need to know that I'm going through. I said, I'm going through some difficult challenges in my life, and I need to know that God loves me. I said, I need to know that God loves me, that you love me. And basically, I wanted her to just turn around and say, "Oh, sweetie, of course we love you. We just love you," and and all that syrupy, lovey stuff. But truly, I was looking for that kind of comfort and that kind of reassurance. And instead, she turned on her heels and sent me an eye of fire, which I pondered. I actually think it might have been Maitreya, though it could have been El Morya, but it was not just her. And she looked at me with such sternness that went straight through me. And she said, unconditional love is a new age thing. You have to earn it. And I was just kind of like left with a blast of fire, right? Like a bolt. And um, and I pondered that, like every other discipline I was given from mother, every other teaching, and some of them were very stripping and painful to the human or to the emotional body. But um, I ponder that because we're all, especially nowadays, we're looking for people really want this idea that it's all love, it's all good, it's all, no worries, everything's, peace and love and and all that stuff. And even in the teachings we find a certain level of that, which is you could say there's a conservative side of the teachings and a liberal side of the teachings. So on the liberal side, where we go into that whole dynamic, and the conservative side is like, it's more like the old Catholic Church Piscean dispensation. And so we have to remember we need to get the middle way of Gautama Buddha here, not going to either extreme. But the point is that in that liberal extreme where people are looking for all that, they're looking for, you are loved just like you are, you are accepted just like you are, you don't have to change, God will take you the way you are, etc. And that is just false teaching. And I was given that very strong rebuke, which was earn it. You have to earn it. And it was a challenge. It was a challenge to my soul. It was a challenge, step up. And you when you do your work, you're not looking for reward. You're just doing it because need to do it, you love to do it, you want to do it, you're determined to do it. And it was probably at least 10 years after that that I really got to experience mother's unconditional love. Uh, in the sense that I really got to experience her personally loving me at a personal level, as a friend, as you know, like as this love of the guru that people are looking for. But I had to go through all of the stripping and fire and initiations to get there. And even after that, I'll tell you one more thing that I was pondering just the other day. The last discipline I got from Mother was in her last days at the ranch. And there was this whole big thing that happened that I was very, that had really upset me. I'm not going to go into all the details, but I wrote to her, and her answer to me was, I rebuke your idolatry. And I remember at the time when I got that letter, I cried and cried and cried. And I said, didn't know I had any idolatry. I'm so sorry. I mean, how, you know, like it just seemed like, and the idolatry thing seemed to have nothing to do with what was going on, you know, like not directly at all. And I couldn't really understand why she was giving me that. And that was one of her last messages. But as I move forward in the years and the decades, I see how much people tend to cling to a path of idolatry, even in the teachings, idolatry of ministers, idolatry of authority, idolatry of, you know, there was a lot of idolatry of Mother's family, et cetera, just idolatry, even idolatry of Mother. And we cannot become the fullness of our Christ self and truly walk the path. Mother said, if you love me, love my teachings. She didn't want a bunch of people idolizing her. She said, if you love me, love my teachings, practice the teachings, put them out there, you know, your devotion needs to be to my work. If you love me, to the teachings, you know? And so that's what, you know, was for me that rebuke, because I look as I move forward, then all the initiations that came afterwards, we have to go up, we have to be able to sit under our own vine and fig tree. We have to connect to our own Christ self. And that does not in any way diminish our contact with the guru. In fact, it sustains it and supports it. You know, we're not to be little robots, you know, like we are to become the fullness, to unfold our own wings, or like the butterfly emerge from the chrysalis. And that formula is going to be different for every person. And if we are stuck in a place of idolatry, we are deferring to outside authority, to outside status, to outside everything. I mean, and we see this in the Catholic Church. We see how stultified, I watch when I go, how stultified there are so many people who have good intentions in their hearts and really are devoted, but there's a stultification that happens because they cannot go past whatever the edict is of the hierarchs, the human hierarchs. And these edicts have nothing to do with God or Jesus necessarily. Some of them, you know, there's percentages of error, and some of them have great percentages. In fact, I was looking at the list of sins that they consider mortal sins here in the diocese. And one of the first ones was association with the New Age movement and association with Eastern teachings. So if you love Buddha, you are in mortal sin. And if you take communion while in mortal sin, meaning you haven't confessed it and got rid of your Buddha, you know, you get a double whammy, two mortal sins. It's like double mortal sin. And I go there and I have my Buddhas, and I have people come to my house and they see my Buddhas, and I go there and I take communion and I say, you know, Jesus is the way, the truth, and the life. And I don't give them that power. But I have had interactions here with local Catholics who are very concerned about that, about what would the priest say, what would the confessor say, what would the Pope say, what would the bishop say. And we find that in all of the movements, including Church Universal Triumphant, every church can have a false hierarchy, which is why the mother has rebuked, and we had a decree at one point where we listed all of the movements and their false hierarchies, and we have to be really aware of this. And the only way to cut through is love. Do we love the teaching enough? Do we love the Guru enough? Do we love our Christ self enough to transcend all of this? And I believe that that is what Mother said when she said, "I rebuke your idolatry." She was preparing me for a time where I would have to stand under my own Christ self, and basically working with her as a co-worker, like the ashram rituals say, co-workers for God, and not in a place of idolatry of her or of others, but also the flip side of this is also to transcend self-idolatry, right? I mean, these are the two perversions on the Scorpio line. So anyway, I learned a lot from that again. So, I had to get rid of this unconditional love consciousness that was new agey and hippie-like, and I had to get rid of the idolatry consciousness that was Piscean-like. And that puts me and puts us, as I endeavor to continuously find and manifest truth, the middle way of our beloved Buddha. So
Thank you.
that good. I like to close with Buddha. It's always nice to close with Buddha. Om Ahum Vajra Guru Padme Siddhi Hum. Yes, it's always good to close with Buddha. So
God bless you.
God bless you too. I'm so thankful. God bless you, and we'll talk again.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.